It begins in silence. Not a revolution that's televised, not a new campaign ad, not in a market crash or in a congressional vote. It's just machines, two of them, agreeing with each other. There's a headset, there's a phone. There's a phone, there's a car. There's a tablet and there's a watch. Another phone probably, a refrigerator, a speaker to listen to. There's an opportunity to listen, to speak, to trust, to know that something happened. What happened? Because there was a beep, something was heard. Bluetooth. This episode isn't about a product. It's about something that's held together but not tangible. It's about something that's invisible. It's iconic, literally, and of course symbolically. And it made your wireless earbuds feel inevitable. It made your fitness tracker seem reliable. It made the Sony speakers that plays your Spotify or your Pandora playlist sound a little better. This is about a standard that didn't scream in your face for attention, came in the door, and then ended up staying. It became foundational to any device that you use today. It became a part of exchanges of information and connection in between machines in a way that appears seamless. It's a way that we expect silence, maybe a beep, portability for certain, connectedness between devices. If there's a twist, it's that Bluetooth was not inevitable. It wasn't even the best, depending on how you want to define what best means. Battery hungry as well. It became a default setting next to in terms of Wi-Fi. I want to unravel a tangle of cords today, a cordless narrative, because sometimes the most consequential decisions happen not because of a performance, not because of a mere number of cords that makes it into the wall. Today, I want to talk about how Bluetooth became a standard, how it became a protocol, what it revealed about the infrastructure of the internet, and how it whispered soft power. We're going to look at the early contenders first in the race to connect devices without cables, and consider why Bluetooth was less about speed and less about lower usage, and it was more about the connection and the portability. I want to be candid with you. Bluetooth is not a product. It's a protocol. It's an agreement that is enshrined in silicone, and it became the standard board of anything that you were syncing in your mobile digital device universe. AirPods that I put in this Fitbit tracker that I took on my run, the speaker that's downstairs playing some music, Spotify or Pandora or any other music app or podcast, maybe even the podcast Decisions at the Fulcrum. Bluetooth started in the late 1990s when tangled wires still ruled the roost, that it didn't feel like it belonged in. This was a time when things like infrared blinked, literally, and when something called Zigbee was dreaming. Wi-Fi also had not calmed down and become usable enough to be a standard protocol. It was getting there, along with Bluetooth. What's so interesting about Bluetooth is that people didn't adopt it because it was loved. It was adopted, at least at first, it wasn't as loved. It was actually clunky and quite unreliable. Pairing it was pretty frustrating with your earpiece, right? It drained the batteries on your smart device. And part of this was due to the fact that batteries were not great either. Bluetooth has changed a lot alongside batteries. What's unique about it is it's not a story about winning in the way that simplistic narrative might discuss. That's an empty term, somewhat boring in my view. What's more interesting is how Bluetooth is about how it stuck and slid into spaces and networked its way until it was dispersed an entire cosmology where cords once were, and where wireless began to feel like it was something that was always there. Bluetooth did not crash though. It didn't have a splashy egg campaign. At the time, it was just appearing, in fact. It was appearing on phone, and it started to appear in your car, and then it showed up in your printer, and then it showed up in your watch, and it was in your speakers, and your keyboards, and your fridge. And before anyone officially declared it to be essential, it had already moved into the house and was already part of the family. It was this quiet standard that appeared seamless. All right, Bluetooth adjacent options though in the late 90s and early 2000s are pretty fascinating actually. Many of them are still around and in use. The early wireless ecosystem was kind of like a crowded emporium more than it was like a parade. There was a lot of competing technologies that jostled for attention in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and each were proposing their own short-range communication capacities. This is the appeal. If you wanted short-range connection, you needed to choose between a few pretty good options. Some limitations for each. Certainly, depending on your goal, you could choose one. Why is short-range connection so important? Well, if I'm in the same room with my iPods and with my phone, I can turn on the Bluetooth and they will sync. But if I go outside, or even if I go, down the hall sometimes, the device is going to lose a signal. The short-range communication is what it's aiming to do. So some Bluetooth adjacent technologies, the ones that could have been, and many of them are still in existence. Let's start with some early favorites. Back in the day, before Bluetooth came along, infrared was the go-to wireless protocol for communication. It was used in things like television remotes and Palm Pilots and early phones and even some laptops. Run by the Infrared Data Association, the IRDA. It was a wireless standard made for transmitting data using infrared. They'd add infrared ports in portable electronic devices for this purpose. Protocols and specifications of the standard that were put together by the IRDA came out in around June of 1994, so around 31 years ago from the time I'm recording this. IR took charge of that scene with the PDAs and the early laptops, and even some desktops made the cut. In the late 90s and early 2000s, this was a serious consideration. This was really thought to be what Bluetooth would become. I've got 4 devices that could sync with Bluetooth in front of me, and they are all within a line of sight. Infrared operates if you're in the line of sight of the device that you want to sync with. It still comes into play in a lot of situations, especially when radio-based wireless technologies won't work as well for the goals that you want. So today, IRDA is still a big part in many of the legacy medical systems. Blood glucose meters, infusion pumps, patient monitoring devices, portable diagnostic tools to deal with that. It's mainly because of that line of sight. Communication is as a security feature in this case. And it's not a limitation, in other words. So that limited range is considered to be a benefit, especially with these medical devices. If you can't see it, you can't send it. Hospitals are looking to use equipment, though, that lasts longer and that meets the strict safety certification standards that they need it to meet. And it also meets HIPAA standards, for example. Also used in industrial settings like barcode scanners and utility meters. And why are these two larger institutions using these two larger organizational traditions? It's about the problem with interference that comes through the electronic devices using radio signals. And here's what's electrifying about that. Electromagnetic noise is basically interference that comes from radio signals. Noise immunity is what you really need in these particular circumstances. It's not affected by the types of electromagnetic interference that can cause issues. So the RF, or the radio frequency systems, include things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. You're aware RF interference happens a lot, doesn't it? It's pretty packed in here right now. I said, if you've ever been to a hotel, and you may have experienced this, I bet you have. You're using the wireless and it starts to lag and you lose the connection and the network gets confused, or they don't remember you at all and you have to log back in. The wireless can be a bit forgetful in hotels. It's especially true, but in places like hospitals and in factories where there are a lot of metal and signal reflections, messing things up is actually a really big deal. That's where these preferences come in for line of sight and for something that has security features. Big players in the industry, like hospitals, like healthcare institutions, use infrared, the IR, because it uses light for transmission, not radio waves. Basically, you've got this device that works both as a short-range receiver and a sender, and it operates within a really narrow wavelength band in the infrared spectrum. Picture a hospital room where there's a Wi-Fi router that's connecting to tablets, and let's say that I'm looking on Bluetooth for a heart monitor, but there's also a refrigerator in the other room that is a smart refrigerator that can sync with Bluetooth that's currently running in the staff room next door. The RF devices can really mess with each other, and that's a problem. Blood glucose readers only work when it's perfectly lined up with its base station, which means it doesn't pick up any interference. Pretty neat, right? It offers a smoother data transfer with no interruptions. So infrared sidesteps all that radio frequency chaos by not getting involved in the space Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are playing in. So there's a big advantage for IR in this case. And it's still around for that reason. Now, what about Zigbee? It is all about being low power, about having a low data rate. So Zigbee devices like light switches and thermostats and security systems in some cases They did a great job for this. Feels pretty subtle, quiet, for it blended in for users. Bluetooth took off because it had just a personal touch. It was going to your everyday. Zigbee is used in the Internet of Things, more of the thermostats and the door locks and the light bulb. And it really shines when it comes to home automation to some extent. But Bluetooth is yours. It's a companion. It's for people who are mobile, and things like thermostats and doors are fixed. They're set in. Bluetooth acts like an extension of the smart mobile setup. It's being paired with things that are more interactive. So Zigbee, think about Zigbee being pretty low on the interactivity scale. If you look at how smart technologies are set up, they really focus on being highly interactive. It's really all about personalization rather just focusing on the continuous data and load. It's the opposite of that if you think about what Bluetooth is. They're doing things in their own ways. Basically, if you think about the difference between Zigbee and Bluetooth, Bluetooth talks to users and Zigbee kind of talks to the wall. Let's look at why Bluetooth came to be what it was. Okay, let's get into our time machine to see what was going on. Let's go back to the year 2001. Let's specifically go to around June of 2001, okay? It's the early summer, and we're getting in our time machine. Here we are in 2001. It looks like a Starbucks Frappuccino is on sale, newly released. I cannot seem to move around in this space without hitting a shoulder bag that has a glass bottle of a vanilla Frappuccino inside it. They're everywhere. I can look at the vending machine. There's more Frappuccinos, and they were there too. And they were like a little luxury in glass. I'm standing outside the movie theater. There are two teens exchanging CDs in orange and pink jewel cases. Yes, CDs, because this is the thing to do. This is what you did when you had a crush on someone. You burned a custom CD for someone you liked. Not only was this common, it was like kind of a love language. Burning a CD required some time, and it required taste, and also required your family's compact computer, or maybe the gateway and the CDR drive. So it was the playlist was important. That's what they're saying. They're talking about you really need to listen to track 3. And don't forget the jewel case. Pick the right color, and make sure the label looks great in the Sharpie. When they give the exchange the CDs to the person they have a crush on, it looks like, what is in my pocket? Oh, it's a ticket to go see Shrek. That came out in May of 2001 and absolutely overshadowed pop culture by June. I see that couple clinking the Starbucks Frappuccinos. Their CDs are swapped, and in my pocket I find a movie ticket crumpled from the excitement and anxiety of being in this different year and not really sure what's happening. And across the street from the movie theater, quietly, unassumingly, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are hanging out in their apartment. They're in grad school. They're talking about whether you should be paired closely or whether you should be scattered widely. Around June of 2001, hypothetically speaking here, when Bluetooth and Wi-Fi were graduate students studying at State Tech University in a place not too far away from wherever you are, but unnamed in this show. This is the scene in the shared apartment. Right off the quad, a stack of pizza boxes leans against a tangled pile of cords that they always trip over. And there are serial cables, there are phone chargers, there are forgotten zip drives, poorly labeled because it's faded with the Sharpie. There's a box fan humming in the window and another one near that computer. It barely fits. On the whiteboard, there's a message that says, thesis draft, due July 10th. In purple marker. And Bluetooth is lounging now on the secondhand futon, considers himself a short-range thinker, a minimalist aesthetic, really surprised that he's in this program. In fact, feels that he's taking everything deeply personally. The thesis, that is, how to connect one-to-one quietly and reliably is the topic. It's got some questions around it. Faculty are skeptical. The other graduate students are the biggest skeptics, especially Ethernet. But Bluetooth is wearing a low-power wristband and syncing with, well, nothing right now. And the roommate, Wi-Fi, a really cool new idea, big thinker, caffeine in hand, any kind of caffeine, a little messier, broad-minded. Her thesis, how a campus can be built without wires. Reading every RFC twice and keeps drawing the same scene, something that's IEEE 802.11b. They really get each other, though. Wi-Fi says Bluetooth needs to think bigger. Bluetooth says Wi-Fi doesn't get the importance of being close and what it means to pair. But they agree on one thing. They agree that the cords must go. Every time they try to leave the apartment, they end up tripping over the same knot of adapters, the dongles, the clamshell phone chargers, this metaphor and reality all at once, the chaos of connectors, the shared nemesis of both. This is what they share together. They're not flashy. They're not what Ethernet is. They don't have a pedigree of IRDA. They're not Palm, right? They're not in a Palm Pilot. No one really seems to understand them. But they feel quietly more powerful than they're seen, and mostly misunderstood, though. Professors and pretty much all the graduate students are dismissing them. They're not going anywhere, they say, although secretly they're like, hey, let's try this, but don't tell Ethernet. They're slow, they're glitchy at the time, but they can feel it. Something's coming. Bluetooth has just tried to sync with Palm, and it did not happen. Palm starts laughing. So they don't enter with a bang, in other words. This is not about winning. It's basically these roommates, basically a sense of coexistence, knowing that if they stay, then eventually they might catch on. It's the quiet negotiation that happens between people or ideas that want to make a difference but aren't arriving just yet. They were interdependent. They came up at the same time, and their narratives do correlate along that chronological timeline of the early to mid 2000s. They're basically writing a syllabus for the next 20 years of connectivity, though. They didn't even know it. RFC stands for Request for Comments. It's not a suggestion box. It's the formal way internet protocols are documented, proposed, and agreed upon. Think of them like scholarly articles for the internet's infrastructure. And this is how to understand how the HTTP and Bluetooth pairing protocols and email behave. IEEE is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, of individuals that sets a lot of technical standards for things that you use every day, like USB and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And 802.11 is a family of wireless networking standards that your wireless network comes from. Your Wi-Fi name, Wi-Fight, the feeling, or the Fibonacci Fi, or the Secret Service Wi-Fi command, or data extraction unit, the AI surveillance terminal. Maybe any of these that you're logging into. Keep going. Homeland Security Wi-Fi bus. Okay, so any of these, they're really important to understand this 802.11. 802.11b was the version that was first released in 1999. It made wireless internet in homes and coffee shops not only possible, but finally usable at speeds of a PS, slow by today's standards, but revolutionary at the time. And so the IEEE is the global body that sets many of the technical standards for everything from Wi-Fi to USB to Bluetooth. And 802.11 is the family of wireless networking standards that Wi-Fi comes from. Any of those names that I listed. So when Wi-Fi is saying that they're reading the RFDs, she's saying basically that she's memorized the scrolls of the internet's secret architecture and is clutching that first sacred draft of Wi-Fi like a bedtime story. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth specifically are not really stars of the department. A lot of people in the research lab at this state tech university are fawning over Ethernet, the smug overachiever who's gossiping behind everyone's back but pretends to be their friend. And they're in everyone's dorm room listening in because they're in the wall jack everywhere and with a reliable 100 Mbps handshake. Ethernet is wearing some pretentious lanyard of Cat5 like it's a badge of honor. It's a badge of their entire sense of self. But it is dependable, it is fast, it has tenure potential, and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi at the time are considered to be experimental. They got invited to conference, but only to the fringe sessions. The old guard is skeptical. They're mostly ignored, though. If you have something like Palm Pilot, for example, Palm Pilot in 2001 wasn't just a novelty. It was a default personal digital assistance for professionals, for students as well that were into tech or interested in that. Palm Pilot filled a niche that could hold your calendar contacts to do this and some basic apps. People used that stylus to tap through menus or to scribble notes in the graffiti, which was Palm, a shorthand script. The Palm 3, the Palm 5, the M500 series were everywhere in offices and airports. And some even had the infrared ports, allowing you to sort of beam your contacts' info into memos from one palm to another. This was the early airdrop. Basically, kind of like a Star Trek airdrop. In 2001, if you didn't have a Palm Pilot and you either weren't working yet or you probably knew someone who did anyway, especially if you worked in consulting or IT or sales, or you subscribed to Wired or Business 2.0 at the time. And so at the time, all this is happening. Bluetooth and wireless are pretty much ignored. But by 2004, 2005, I'm going to come back. So we're going to go forward a little bit, just take a few steps forward in our time machine and go to around late 2004, where Bluetooth, once a quiet, low-power oddball in the corner, not saying much, has entered the room with a bit of swagger. Everyone's wondering. Some people are giggling. Some people are just shaking their head. They didn't have a press release about this. There's no commercial evidence to commercial on Bluetooth. And what is this Viking rune? Now, we're on this tech campus. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi have survived another chaotic semester. IRDA is still quoting protocol manuals. Palm and Ethernet run the lab printer, but something is shifting. Let's talk about Rune, the sun, over the quad. And Palm is holding court in the lab, smirking, stylus spinning in hand. And when Bluetooth comes in, Palm says, "Oh look, Blue brought a little symbol to class. What's next, a family crest?" And everyone starts laughing, also nervously. Ethernet chimes in, because of course they have to say something. Mumbling, "Symbols don't move packets, Blue. Try 100 Mbps. You want to impress me? Get adopted by Cisco." Bluetooth says nothing though. Just drops the hand out with a new icon. A strange, angular, lightning bolt bee-looking thing. And what is it? It's called a bind-rune, he says, in a calm but not quiet way. Actually, it's King Harald, the one who united Denmark. Kind of like I'm about to unite all your phones. Palm snorts. "Oh, that's a cute history lesson. You gonna pay with a fax machine?" "Maybe. Probably also your phone, your car, your laptop, and your headset. You know, things that people are actually going to use." So what's happening here? What's going on? Bluetooth icon is literally based on this person named King Harald Bluetooth Gormson, who united Danish tribes. And the designers of this used that Nordic rune of what was the H in this language and the B. So they were superimposed into a bind rune that symbolized, you guessed it, the connectivity. In 2004 into 2005, Bluetooth begins appearing everywhere. It's in Nokias. It's in Motorola's. It's shipped with phones in it. It's paired with car stereos. Of course, it's in your earpiece. And that's when the blinking earpiece was questionable. You weren't sure if someone was talking to you or talking to themselves or they are talking to someone. Ethernet is still in offices, but Wi-Fi is also rising. You didn't need to drill holes in the wall for it, basically. So Bluetooth didn't win here by being the best. Bluetooth by quietly, persistently being there. With a rune then that no one could pronounce, but everyone learned to trust. And Palm, well, let's just say that when the iPhone finally arrived, even the stylus couldn't write its way back into the syllabus. Bluetooth's biggest advantage, though, wasn't the technical perfection. It was actually the compatibility that it could have. There's no need for big antennas. There's no need for bulky ports. It could be embedded into tiny chips that fit into a flip phones. Things like hands-free headsets for calls, contact syncing, and eventually tethering and then music streaming after 2003 were tasks where perfection wasn't necessarily the goal, but convenience was, scale was. And people tolerated some issues with it because they were really trying to untangle themselves from all of those cords. So Bluetooth also wasn't owned by one company. It was governed by the Bluetooth Special Interest Group, founded by Ericsson, IBM, Intel, Nokia, and Toshiba in the late 1990s. And that meant it could be licensed and adopted across hardware makers. Wow. All of a sudden, Bluetooth is looking like they knew what they were doing. The battery issues were manageable. Early phones had really poor battery life, so users expected delays in charging, and the bar was maybe low, but the newer Bluetooth versions later on reduced those power standards like profiles like Bluetooth Low Energy, later introduced in the 4.0 version. Security was then also contained. In hindsight, it was kind of a classic adoption by inertia. Users didn't demand it, but once the feature was bundled in, they did find it maybe even charming, but certainly convenient. It became expected. Phones adopted Bluetooth not because it was flawless, but because it was physically small enough to integrate. It's standardized across compatible devices. It was good enough for casual, low data tasks, and it appeared futuristic and wireless. Okay, there you go. Thank you, Wi-Fi, for coming along. It was a win in terms of the hands-free freedom in a culture that was really fatigued by cables. It slipped into those sockets of convenience and minimalism that were left open and shoes ready to be filled. So it won by doing just enough at the right time, in the right place, by being there, by showing up. It sounds a lot like soft power because it is. It also sounds like network theory, which is a framework that is even more precise. Bluetooth became what's known as a weak tie, and I want to explain what I mean by that. So, in organizational communication, your strong ties are your close collaborators. Your weak ties are the bridge people. So, think of the strong ties like the people that you arrive at a dinner party with, your closest friends. You know their stories. You may have read their diary. You know their jokes. You know their go-to anecdotes, right? You've heard them probably more than once. But your weak ties are those guests that you meet in the kitchen while looking for the bottle opener. You didn't really plan to talk to them, but all of a sudden they've mentioned a job opening that you hadn't heard about, and they introduce you to someone who's also there who shares a new perspective on a skill set that you already have, but you weren't sure how to use. Those are that's a weak tie in organizational communication. They don't offer certainty, but they do bring novelty and opportunity and some flexibility. So the ones who introduce you to a new tool, a new market, a new missing piece that you didn't know you needed, and they widen your circle. Bluetooth is not your central server. It's not your corporate intranet. It is that person who is maybe a consultant who's there, who knows how to sync your presentation to the conference room projector just in time for you to start. It connects your phone, right? It's not the phone though. It connects it to your car, but it's not the car. Your wristwatch syncs with your phone, your earbuds, your video call, and it's compatible enough. And that's the power of really a weak tie. It doesn't replace your strong connections. It opens doors between them. So instead of pretending like it could do everything, by the 2010s, to 4.0 especially, not trying to compete with Wi-Fi anymore. It wasn't trying to do that. It wasn't trying to handle huge file transfers or stream lossless audio. It leaned into that ambient bridge role, silent guide, and a weak tie in that device ecosystem. So when Bluetooth pivoted from trying to perfect everything to simply connecting what it could and doing so better, it became indispensable. And it became part of all of these devices. And you know what? You barely think about it. And that's the point. You do expect your headphones to connect to Bluetooth. You expect your car to remember your phone. When we think about weak ties, it's also important to consider boundary spanning. This is network theory at its best. Boundary spanning nodes in a network means that Bluetooth isn't the content, it's the connection. Just like in organizational networks, the bridges between groups carry the most potential for innovation and coordination. So I can sync my notes from my phone with my laptop by using AirDrop. Drawing on Susan Laystar's and Jeffrey Bulker's work, it's that infrastructure isn't neutral. Bluetooth's invisible handshakes govern which devices are in and out. You can tell it to forget something. It determines what counts as connected or disconnected, who gets to pair and who doesn't. So even though it doesn't yell or brand itself loudly, it doesn't need to, it sets rules for social and technical connections, and it's an infrastructural agent in this way. It didn't ask to be loved. It didn't ask to be the most popular. It didn't want to make a splash, or it didn't want to be everywhere anymore. It just is now woven into the fabric of our devices, like a quiet nod that you appreciate, but you don't necessarily remember having and performing every day. And that's how infrastructure wins, not with performance, but with presence by being there. Thank you for listening today and learning about how Bluetooth became a part of these devices. This has been Decisions at the Fulcrum. My name is Dr. William Hoffman, and I hope that you make some really solid connections. I'll talk to you next time.